I never imagined home life would become intolerable. At 23, I was already attempting to find my path in life and freelancing to establish myself in the content development industry. Although it wasn't perfect, living with my mom suited us. I paid utilities, rent, and even my mom's phone plan. I wasn't a freeloader. That was until Kelly, my mom's best friend, and her 2 children moved in. I had a place where I could work and plan for a brighter future. I didn't start whining at first. My mother assured me Kelly's nasty divorce was transitory. She was going through. Just a few weeks until she gets back on her feet, she remarked. I decided the guest room would be sufficient. Though not large, it worked. Those few weeks stretched into months. Not enough anymore was the guest room. At 6 and 8, Kelly's children were noisy, messy, and utterly unconcerned about limits. Running, screaming across the home, they considered it as their personal playground. I remained silent even then, expecting they would calm down. Then it occurred. One evening, grocery bags in hand, I noticed something was strange right away when I got home. Usually kept closed, my door was wide open. I could hear laughing and my keyboard clicking from the corridor. My tummy sank. Kelly's children were on my computer pounding away at the keyboard as I opened the door. My tools of trade, cameras, microphones, and lighting from my studio had been pushed into a corner and thrown like trash. Toys and cookie crumbs were all over my bed. What the hell is going on? My mom came storming in before the kids stopped, wide-eyed, unable to react. I screamed and dropped the goods on the floor. Your problem is what? She scowled and asked, My problem? I gestured to the anarchy. They show up in my room, using my tools without my authorization. They needed more space, she said, shuffling. Your room is the largest. It is only reasonable they could utilize it. Fair? They are only young people crying out loud. How fair was it to occupy the one area I considered as my own? Mom, I live in this room. I pay for it, including rent. You cannot simply cut me off, as her voice rises. I decide what goes on in my house. It is mine. They are going through a difficult period. You should be more sympathetic. Understanding. I glanced at her in shock. Regarding my difficulty. What about it? Considering that I work here as well, should they damage my equipment? What then? Are you scheduled to replace it? Her answer was a contemptuous laugh. Stop acting so dramatically. Children are them. Let them have some fun. That was the realization that this was more than merely spatial. It concerned respect. That is, lack of it. Kelly's children, 2 total strangers to me, mattered more to my mother than her own son. That night I spent in silence, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The house I had helped to preserve, the room I had worked so hard to keep, was no more mine. Not only was my room a bedroom, it was my haven, my office, my getaway. I had nothing without it, no privacy, no control, no stability. The next morning, I tried talking with my mother once more. I was not even allowed to set foot in it without being chastised. Mom, I need my room back. It is not only a place to sleep. I work from here. My tools. She cut me off once more. You are selfish. Kelly's children are handling plenty as it is. You grow up as an adult. A little discomfort is something you can manage. Her remarks defied belief. She shrugged her eyes, at least had to relocate her studio arrangement somewhere safe if they stayed in my room. Nothing else except here has space. You will just have to cope with it. At that time, I understood she lacked logic. That evening, I heard Kelly in the kitchen complaining to her mother about her decision, not mine. He deserves this. Doesn't even give a damn about how difficult this is for us. He'll get over it, my mom said dismissingly. He always does. Their comments go deeper than I would have thought. I came to notice they no longer considered me to be a member of this family. That was the moment I realized. I was done. I was only a paycheck to them, a handy source of revenue who deserved no say in his own house. I would take my contributions elsewhere if they did not bring me honor. The next morning I began searching for rented accommodations. I knew staying would ruin me, even if leaving would not be easy. Not as simple as I had imagined was finding a new home to reside. Having freelancing income, I had to have a strict budget. and the rental market wasn't exactly friendly to someone like me. Every listing I looked at seemed like a compromise, too costly, too far, too small. Still, I kept looking since I knew I couldn't live in a house where I wasn't appreciated. At home, life became intolerable. Kelly's children had seized my room officially. My formerly immaculate workstation now resembled a daycare. Every time I came by, I would get flashes of crayon drawings on the walls, toys scattered across the floor, and my equipment hastily pushed into the corner, dusty. My blood boiled at sight alone. I sought to save all I could. One day, Kelly was out running errands when I went into my old room to get some books and headphones. Chaos greeted me as soon as I opened the door. Cookie crumbs on my desk, one of my camera lenses perched dangerously on the edge of the table, and my microphone, my $1,200 microphone, hanging off the side of the chair like it were a toy. Before I could even start gathering my things, Kelly's kids burst into the room. "What on earth are you doing?" one of them yelled, as if I were the invader. "This is my stuff," I responded, keeping my voice cool despite growing frustration. "I'm just getting a few items. No, it's ours now," the younger one gasped, heaving out his chest. I found it hard. Kelly walked in before I could reply. "In here, what are you doing?" Her fists on her hips, she said. "It's my room," I remarked straightforwardly. "I'm just taking a few things I need." She laughed. "Your room is no longer this one. You have to respect their space." Her remarks nearly made me giggle. "Love their space? You're talking about my life. This is my equipment, my space. They are simply kids," she burst. "You're behaving like they're destroying your whole universe. They are ruining my world." I cried at last and yelled, "To me, this is more than just a room. I work at this place. My means of subsistence is this." Kelly waved her hand dismissively. "If something happens to my gear, I'm screwed. You're acting dramatically. Nothing is going to happen." I knew she lacked logic. That night, I addressed my mother once more. One more try at a fix. "Mom, this isn't working," I said, seated across from her at the kitchen table. That night, I said something I would regret. "I have to have my room back." She groaned, like she was already worn out from the talk, and let me relocate my tools somewhere secure. "We've gone over this already. Kelly and her children need the space more than you do." I tried to keep cool by clenching my hands under the table. Still, I pay rent for that space. Given that I cannot even utilize it, how fair is this? Her eyes narrow. "This is my residence." Her expression dropped for a second before she recovered. "And if this is your house," I shouted back, "then maybe you don't need my rent anymore. What's fair? Don't be crazy. You know I need your help with the bills." "Then treat me like I matter," I replied, my voice steady but forceful. "Mom, you cannot have it both ways." She crossed her arms and said, "Either respect me and the fact I contribute here, or I'll take my contributions somewhere else." "Where would you possibly even go? You cannot afford to live on your own." I looked at her. "Watch me." The next week was an email fog of phone calls and rental viewings. On the other side of town, I eventually came upon a little studio flat. Though the building was older than I would have liked, and the paint was flaking in some areas, it was reasonably priced, and most importantly, mine. When I told my mother, her response was precisely what I expected: incredulity, then rage. I signed the lease and started organizing my relocation. Her voice shook as she asked, "You're leaving us behind?" "I'm not giving up anyone," I responded coolly. She scowled at me. "You're being selfish. Clearly no one else here is going to." "I'm taking care of myself." I answered, "I've been helping Kelly and her children. I paid rent. I have addressed invasions of bills. But you determined that none of that really counted. Without even asking, you stole my space, my life. That is not helpful." She opened her lips to argue, but I cut her off. "She is taking advantage. This weekend is my moving date. You can ask Kelly to start helping with bills if you would want me to continue. Perhaps also her husband. But I'm done." I showed up with a rented van and a few companions early on the move's morning. Kelly was drinking coffee at the kitchen table while her children ran about the living room already awake. As I arrived, she cast a dubious glance at me. "What's going on?" Her eyebrows flew up as she asked. "I'm moving out," I answered simply. "Seriously? For this over? That's pitiful. I turned aside her and walked upstairs to my old chamber. I nearly found it impossible to breathe when I unlocked the door. Marker drawings covered the walls, my bed stacked high with toys and clothing, and my desk buried beneath trash. I turned to one of my buddies. My tools of trade, my equipment appeared to have not been touched in weeks. They grabbed their phone and started filming as I gently started packing my equipment. Kelly yelled as she went upstairs, clearly realizing what was occurring. "You can't just steal things!" Her shout was loud. "Their room right now is this one dot." Keeping my voice calm, I turned to her. "Kelly, this is my tool set. I paid for it. I'm carrying it with me." "You're being ridiculous," she said. "You're throwing a tantrum over a couple of kids needing space." "This isn't a tantrum," I responded. She kept screaming, but I tuned her out and concentrated on packing since this is me sticking up for myself. My mom showed up, her look a mix of desperation and wrath, just before we loaded the last box into the vehicle. "You're really doing this?" Her voice shook as she asked. "You're leaving us merely because you didn't get your way?" I met her squarely in the eye. "You did not respect me. Hence I am going. You handed that place away without asking. I paid rent for it." Her mouth opened to disagree, but I held up a hand since you made it abundantly evident that I am not a priority here. "Don't." I decided to drive away from the house and experienced both relief and grief. I had no idea, though, the aftermath was far from finished. My first night in my new apartment was a weird concoction of relief and anxiety. The room was little, the walls naked, and the air smelled faintly of fresh paint. But I sensed some calm for the first time in weeks. I put up my studio equipment painstakingly. There is no yelling, no breaking toys, no continual sense that I was a second-class person in my own house. Every cable, every camera, every bit of lighting had a purpose, and watching all of it come together gave me control I hadn't experienced in years. I backed off, looked about, and inhaled deeply. Though small, this was mine. My phone began to vibrate the following morning. Her first text came from my mother. "You cannot just walk away like this. Our family is this." Her second book, 5 minutes later. "You're being selfish and immature. We stick together." I first ignored Kelly and her children, concentrating on sorting the remaining few boxes, but they asked you to step up, and you rushed away. Still, the texts never stopped arriving. Her voice had changed from angry to desperate by lunchtime. "We have bills to pay with your rent money. You know I cannot do this without you." That one stopped me. For a second, my remorse burst out. I realized that maintaining the house afloat had depended mostly on my contributions. I suddenly reminded myself, though, why I had originally departed. My rent payments got me no regard or thought. I replied back, "I'm not living there anymore, so I'm not paying rent. Staying had only drained me emotionally and financially. You will have to find another solution." Her reply came nearly right away. "How could you do this to your own family? You have always been so self-serving." I watched the TV and felt my gut clench. I wanted to snap, to tell her how she had let Kelly and her children run over my life, how she had discounted me each time I tried to defend myself. I inhaled deeply, though, and dropped my phone. Nothing would change if engaging were done. She wanted control. She did not want to know my side of things. Over the following week, the consequences spread. Calling my siblings and other relatives, my mother spun the tale in her favor. Not too long afterward, I began receiving texts from relatives I hadn't seen in years. "I can't believe you left your mom like this. She is devastated. Family comes before pride." The worst one came from my aunt, who sent a protracted, guilt-ridden letter on how my mother had given everything for me and how I was betraying her. I didn't reply to any of them, as it was obvious my mother had omitted some important information, like the part where she locked me out of my room and turned it over. A few days later, my sister called. I wasn't going to defend my choices to folks who hadn't been there to witness the whole picture. I said, "Hey," as she was the one member of the family I still felt close to. She seemed reluctant. "How does the new location stand?" "It's fine," I answered warily, expecting the tone to inevitably change. She sighed. "Mom is rather offended. She doesn't know how she's going to pay the bills without your rent." I bit back my first response. She has choices. Kelly might begin making contributions. Alternatively, she may approach Dad for assistance. She won't do that, my sister replied softly. You know how she is, I remarked sadly. Yeah, I do. She's not trying to guilt you, my sister answered, but her voice lacked conviction. She would rather guilt me into coming back than take responsibility. She's simply overburdened. So was I said. But that didn't matter when Mom instructed me to suck it up and handed Kelly's kids my room. I'm done playing the family scapegoat. My sister said not much after that. She hung back and murmured something about school. Although I knew she felt caught in the midst, I couldn't allow her guilt to control my backtracking. Not this time. Then the last punch arrived. I woke up one morning to a text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, noticed your mom's Facebook post. You're good. Confused, I inquired what they meant. They emailed me a screen grab of a lengthy moving post my mother had created. She portrayed me in it as the villain, saying I had left the family and her behind in their hour of need. She wrote about how Kelly and her children were like family, how I was leaving her in financial ruin, and how she had always supported me. She omitted, of course, how she had taken away my room, disregarded my worries, and discounted my contributions. I was enraged since the post was expertly written to make me look like a selfish, unappreciative child and her like a saint. One thing we could debate with one another privately was one thing. Running our dirty clothes online crossed a line. Though I wanted to say to present the truth for everyone to view, I stopped myself. For what reason was the point? Over the next 2 weeks, I concentrated on getting used to my new surroundings. The people that mattered already knew the truth, and the rest were not worth my effort. I recreated my studio configuration, caught up on work, and began to feel like myself once more. The silence was like a salve for my ragged emotions. But my mum persisted. There was no more yelling, no more guilt trips, and no more sense of me not mattering. The books kept arriving, alternating between pleading and wrath. I'm sorry for how things turned out. Please return. We'll work things out. Then, you're destroying this family. How can you be so egotistical? And last, I have to sell the house should you not return. Is that what you wish for? Every comment bit me, but I stayed strong. I realized going back would not fix anything. Now Mom was coping with the fallout from her decisions. She had made them. I did not help to tidy her mess. She then turned up at my home one day, her expression a mix of sorrow and desperation. I wasn't ready for what she had to say, and I wasn't expecting my mom to show up at my new apartment. I stopped as I unlocked the door and saw her standing there. She was tired and worried, and her typical confidence seemed replaced with doubt. I momentarily thought about shutting the door, but my curiosity won out. "Can we talk?" she inquired, her voice softer than I had ever heard. I stopped, then moved aside. She came in, staring around the space. She was clearly absorbing the sharp difference between my new arrangement and the anarchy I had left behind at home. Though modest, the area was orderly. My studio tools were set in the corner precisely. Though not opulent, it was mine. She sat down at my small kitchen table, wringing her hands. Still standing, I leaned against the counter with arms crossed and asked, "Why are you here?" My tone was more severe than I wanted, so I asked, and she startled, but straightened herself fast. "I have given what you said much thought. About respect." I arched an eyebrow, not sure where this was headed. Her voice faltered as she acknowledged not handling things the way I should have. For a time, I felt a flutter of hope. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone, but now I realized that I pushed you too far. Perhaps she was at last understanding. Perhaps this was the beginning of a sincere apology. She said suddenly, "I just need you to come back." And there it was. "We can handle this together." Her head shot up, her eyes wide as I stated bluntly, "I'm not coming back." "But the bills are not my responsibility," I said, interrupting. "You threw me under the bus while I was paying rent, helping the house. You shut me out, handed up my room, and treated me as though I didn't matter. Why would I turn back to that?" She opened her lips to answer, then closed them once more, as though she were looking for the proper words. She responded at last, "I didn't mean to cause you to feel that way. I was simply looking out for Kelly and her children." "What about me?" I asked, my voice growing louder. Where was my help coming from? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I was not done. "You side with Kelly every time. I was working, paying rent, trying to establish a future, and you did not even consider how your actions affected me. Even when her children were ruining my stuff, even when I begged you to let me move my tools, you made it abundantly evident that I was not a top priority. So I created myself." She sniffed and wiped her eyes. I had no intention of it getting this terrible. What else to do eluded me. "Kelly has nowhere to go." "Then ask Kelly to start contributing," I said. "Ask her husband to take front stage." But there was a long hush. "You cannot expect me to tidy the mess you generated." Her shoulders slumped as she turned down to her hands. She mumbled, "I just wanted to keep the family together." And I sighed, relaxing somewhat. Family is not about one-sided guilt trips and sacrifices. It is about encouragement and respect. And right now, I felt neither of those things from you. The silence continued, and I questioned whether she had at last understood. Then she uttered the one thing that let me realize nothing had really changed. "Can you at least help out with the bills for a little bit, just till Kelly gets hired?" I shook my head and laughed bitterly. "Unbelievably beautiful. You're not even paying attention." She startledly looked up. "What exactly do you mean?" "I mean you're still working on fixing this on my back," I remarked, my voice icy. "You are not remorseful for what you did. I'm sorry for leaving. And now you're here, not because you respect me, but rather because you need something from me." "That's not true," she objected, but her voice faltered. "It is," I answered firmly, "and for this reason I am unable to return." Her expression crumpled, and for a second I felt a stab of remorse. I need to be somewhere I value, not only utilize, but I put it off. "You figure it out," I responded, after spending too long putting her demands ahead of mine. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "The same way I worked out my move-out and life reconstruction strategy. You need to start taking responsibility." She departed soon after that, and I felt a weird variety of feelings. Relief for having stayed my ground, sadness at this state of affairs, and a residual resentment that she still lacked complete understanding even after everything. The books and calls continued, but I stopped answering. I was not going to let her pull me back into the tumult. I had to give my career, myself, and the life I was creating first priority. Kelly sent me an unexpected note 1 month later, and what she had to say completely reversed everything. 1 month went by, and I was starting to get used to my new existence. My work was back on schedule, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I had clarity. Although at first startling, my mother's silence was a relief. No books loaded with remorse, no desperate calls, just serenity. Then one evening I was producing a film for a customer when my phone buzzed. My gut turned over as I stared at the screen. Kelly was the one. I gave the message some thought before opening it. "I'm sorry for all. Are we free to chat?" Though I argued against it, curiosity won out. I responded, "About what?" Her reply arrived fast. "Very crucial. You need, in my opinion, to be aware of the true situation." We got together at a little coffee shop close to my place the next afternoon. I hardly saw her when she first stepped in. She seemed disorganized, her customary confidence replaced with nervous energy. She sat across from me, as though her cup were a lifeline dot. She started, her voice faltering. "Thanks for meeting me." I said sharply, "I'm not sure why I'm here. What would you want?" She stopped and fixed her coffee. "I have to come straight forward about your mother." Not anticipating this, I wrinkled an eyebrow. "What about her?" She sighed and slumped her shoulders. "I am ashamed of the way things turned out. Though I felt I was supporting her, I had no idea how much she was lying to everyone." "Lying about what?" I leaned forward, Dot. She stopped once more, then blurted it out. "Your mother kindly denied me staying there. She begged for money from me. Many pounds of money. I stopped." The words did not really register. "What?" Kelly said she had let me and the children stay as long as I paid her rent under the table. You know, we needed somewhere to live, so initially I gave it little thought. She continued nevertheless, asking for more. My brain flew. So you were paying her rent all through this? She nodded. More than rent, indeed. She assured me it covered groceries, the bills, everything. I had no idea she was also grabbing money from you. I felt rage rising in my chest. My mother had maintained throughout all this time that she required my rent to keep the place operating, but she was also robbing Kelly. She still had the cheekiness to make me feel bad about leaving. Why are you mentioning this now? My voice strained as I asked. Because she has been blaming me for you leaving, Kelly said. She stated you wouldn't have felt pushed out if I hadn't moved in. Actually, though, she begged me to move in. She admitted she needed the money. I leaned back and considered her remarks. Now it all made sense. Why my mom had been so quick to side with Kelly. Why she had discounted my worries. Why she had refused to ask Kelly to help when I left. She had previously been taking money from her. Kelly apologized for the way things went. I also had no idea you were paying rent. Should I have, I would have. It doesn't matter right now, I answered, cutting her off. What's done is done. On the inside, though, I was boiling. My mother had not only mistreated me, she had also used everyone around her for her personal benefit. She was paying the cost right now as well. That evening, I sat in my apartment mentally revisiting the conversation. Part of me wanted to demand an explanation by facing my mother. Still, another side of me understood it wouldn't change anything. She would twist the tale, deny it, and somehow make herself the victim once more. I choose to concentrate on myself instead. Although I could not control my mother's behavior, I did manage the degree of influence I let her have over me. She had already grabbed too much. 1 week later, my sister picked up. She sounded different this time. Less defensive, more careful. She said cautiously, Hey, I heard Kelly spoke to you. Sure, I said. She shared with me everything. There came a protracted silence. My sister answered at last, I didn't know. Mom was pulling money from her and I had no idea. She simply needed help with the expenses, I thought. So did I responded with bitterness. We were both, however, presumably mistaken. She is losing it, my sister said. Kelly departed last week. She claimed she could not keep paying Mom, and right now, Mom is frantically trying to decide what to do. I answered nothing. Though another part of me felt hollow, part of me felt validated. I wanted things to end differently. Her sister said, She wants you to come back. She continues claiming she's sorry and she'll repair things. I chuckled bitterly. She doesn't apologize. She simply seems desperate. On the other side, there was stillness, and I knew my sister was crying. She said, I'm sorry for taking her side, for not speaking out for you. I had no idea it was this nasty. I experienced a glimmer of connection for the first time in months. It's fine, I said gently. You were mired in the middle. You already know, though. A few days later, my mother sent me a text that fundamentally altered everything. It was not guilt or rage this time. That was something else entirely. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. This time, it was not the usual assault of guilt or wrath. It was brief, straightforward, and frightening. I should speak with you. Kindly. I wrestled with not paying attention. She could not possibly say what more. But the tone stopped me as well. Against my better judgment, I said, What would you want? Her answer came nearly right away. Could you stop by the house? I have to go through everything. Later that afternoon, I discovered myself dragging up to the house I had once called home. Returning after everything felt odd, as though the air itself bore a weight I had not noticed I had lost when I left. The place was absolutely quiet when I walked inside. Kelly's children's anarchy had vanished, and for a brief period it felt nearly normal. Sitting at the kitchen table, my mother had a pale complexion and firmly clasped hands. She said gently, I didn't think you would come. Keeping a neutral tone, I said, You said you needed to talk. So speak. She waved for me to sit, but I kept on my feet. She sighed, a long, unsteady breath that seemed to weigh years of manipulation. She started with, Kelly's gone. Last week she moved out. I knew, I said. She explained it to me. My mother squatted, her composure breaking. I never intended for things to go this far. I was so hungry. I had no idea how to hold things together after your dad went. When Kelly offered to pay to stay here, I believed that would be the fix as the bills continued mounting. You didn't just let her stay, I remarked, my voice tight. You put me aside. You grabbed her money as well as mine. You didn't give a damn about who suffered as long as you had what you needed. Tears flooded her eyes, but I held back. You lied to everyone, I said. You made me feel inadequate, as if I was self-serving and seeking fundamental respect. You now want me to pardon you since you have little choice? She gave a quick headshake. No, it is not like that. Simply said I wanted to right things. Fix stuff? I gave a sour laugh. You are not here to make repairs. You came here because you needed me to tidy your mess. She held out a hand while her voice shook. Please, I'm sorry. I never meant to offend you. I looked at her, the weight of years of letdown sinking in my chest. Though you didn't mean to, you did damage me, repeatedly over and under, and I cannot continue to let you bring me down simply because you are my mother. Her face collapsed, and I felt momentarily guilty for her, nearly almost. She cried out, despair threading her voice as I turned to go. Wait, said there is more. I stopped but turned neither around. What? Her next utterances were hardly audible. House, I'm running out. Last week the bank sent a foreclosure warning. I stopped, the words striking like a gut strike. What? Tears running down her cheeks, she revealed she had fallen behind on the mortgage. I used Kelly's money and yours to cover what I could, but after you both left, I don't have enough. I felt rage flash across me. You wanted me back for this reason as well, not out of apologies. Rather, you need me to save you. She maintained, it's not like that, while her voice shook. I just thought, you thought I would take care of this for you, I said, like I have fixed everything else. She started to cry. Her hands shook. I have no idea what to do. I'm going to lose the house. Please, I'm pleading with you. I remained there for a time, staring at the woman who had reared me. She had promised so much of love and encouragement, but had shown me so little of either. Part of me wanted to save the house where I had lived for so many years. But another side of me understood the truth. I had no bearing on this. Finally, my voice calm. I can't, I said. Not me. Her crying got louder, but I stayed the same. You made your decisions, I said. You now have to cope with the fallout. I've accomplished enough. Heart sad but determined. I left that house for the last time. I wouldn't give my future to correct her mistakes. I wasn't accountable for them. My sister told me over the next few weeks that my mother had sold off what little she could to keep the bank away. Kelly had told everyone about my mom's machinations, and even the extended relatives who had been so fast to criticize me were starting to realize the truth. Keeping my distance, I concentrated on my career, life, and the peace I had battled so fiercely to recover. My mother texted me several times, always apologizing, but I ignored her. I am unable to. Though trust was gone and I wasn't ready to mend something so damaged, forgiveness might come eventually. Looking back now, I see leaving involved more than just getting away from a poisonous situation. It was about recovering my voice, value, and life. Family is about respect, love, and mutual support, not about blood. I discovered the hard way. And occasionally, even if it hurts, the greatest thing you can do for yourself is walk away. A note from my sister came months later. She had also left, opting to finish her education living with a friend. Alone in the house, my mother was still attempting to put the life she had disjointed together. I felt only sad that it had come to this. I did not feel triumphant or defended. I knew, though, I had made the correct decision, and I felt free for the first time in many years.